I never used to lock my car doors while driving. I know that sounds stupid, especially living alone. But when you grow up in a quiet suburb where the most exciting thing that ever happens is a coyote knocking over someone's trash can, locking your doors just doesn't cross your mind. That changed after what happened to me last fall, and honestly, locking my doors is probably the least of the habits I've picked up since then. I'm 28. I work as an IT technician for a small company about 25 minutes from my house. The commute is mostly back roads, 2-lane stretches cutting through farmland, and a few patches of woods before you hit the residential streets closer to my neighborhood. I've driven that route so many times, I could probably do it with my eyes closed. I know every curve, every stop sign, every dead intersection where the light takes forever to change. It's one of those drives where your brain just goes on autopilot and you zone out until you're pulling into your driveway. It was a Thursday in mid-October. I'd stayed late at work to finish a server migration that was taking way longer than it should have. By the time I left the office, it was almost 9:30. The parking lot was empty, except for my car and one other, which belonged to the cleaning crew. I remember the air being cold enough that I could see my breath, and the sky was that deep navy blue you only get in the fall when there's no cloud cover at all. I got in my car and pulled out of the lot, nothing unusual. I turned onto the main road that feeds into the back roads, and that's when I first noticed the headlights. They were sitting pretty far back, maybe a quarter mile behind me. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Other people work late. Other people drive these roads. It would have been weirder if there were no cars at all. But after about 5 minutes, I realized the headlights hadn't changed distance. They weren't getting closer, but they weren't falling behind either. They were just sitting there, maintaining the exact same gap. Now I drive a little fast on these roads, not reckless, but definitely above the speed limit. Most people either pass me or fall way behind because they're not comfortable doing 55 on a road with no streetlights. This car was matching me perfectly. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was someone who also drove this route every day and knew the road just as well as I did. Maybe they were just a confident driver. I turned up my music and tried to focus on the drive, then I hit the first turn. It's a hard left that takes you from the main stretch onto a county road that runs along the edge of a horse farm. Most people don't take that turn. It's a shortcut that only locals know about, and even most locals don't bother with it because it shaves maybe 2 minutes off the drive. I took it out of habit. The headlights took it too. My grip on the steering wheel tightened a little. I was paying more attention now. The road narrowed, and the trees got thicker on both sides, blocking out what little moonlight there was. The headlights behind me were the only other light source, and they felt closer than before, even though I couldn't tell for sure. I made the second turn. This one's a right onto a road that's barely wide enough for 2 cars. There's a busted mailbox on the corner that's been there for years, and a drainage ditch on the left that fills up every time it rains. Nobody takes this road unless they live on it or they're lost. I've never once seen another car on it at night. The headlights followed. That's when the rationalization started breaking down. My brain was still trying to give me excuses. Maybe they live out here. Maybe they're using GPS, and it's routing them this way. But my body was already responding. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips where they gripped the wheel. I had one more turn before my street. I decided to test it. Instead of turning onto my road, I drove straight past it. I watched my street disappear in the rearview mirror and kept going, heading toward a dead end about half a mile up. If this car was actually following me, they'd have no reason to keep going this way. The road leads to nothing, just a gravel turnaround next to an old water treatment building that's been shut down for years. The headlights stayed behind me. I didn't go all the way to the dead end. About 200 yards past my street, I pulled a sharp U-turn in someone's driveway and headed back the way I came. As I passed the other car, I tried to get a look at the driver, but their headlights were too bright and the windows were tinted. All I could make out was the shape of the vehicle, a dark-colored SUV, maybe a Tahoe or something similar. Not new, but not beat up either. I turned onto my street and pulled into my driveway. I sat there for a second with my engine running, watching the road. The SUV drove past the entrance to my street without stopping. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and told myself I'd been paranoid. That was the first night. The second time was 4 days later, the following Monday. Same situation. I left work late, around 9:15. I was on the back roads when I noticed headlights behind me again. Same distance, same pacing. I immediately felt that cold sensation creep back into my chest. This time, I didn't take my usual route. I stayed on the main road longer, took a different series of turns, even doubled back at one point. The headlights followed every single move I made. When I turned, they turned. When I slowed down, they slowed down. When I sped up, they matched me. It was like they were tethered to my bumper by an invisible cable. I drove around for almost 20 extra minutes before finally pulling into my driveway. I was shaking when I got inside. I locked the front door, then the back door, then checked every window on the first floor. My house isn't big. It's a small 2-bedroom ranch with a detached garage and a modest backyard that borders a thin strip of woods. There's a motion light above the garage and another one on the back porch, but that's about it for exterior security. That night, I barely slept. Every time a car drove down my street, I sat up in bed and listened until it passed. None of them stopped. The next morning, I walked out to my car and noticed something that made my stomach turn. There was a small scratch on the driver's side door handle. It wasn't deep, more like someone had run a key or a fingernail along the metal, but it was fresh. The paint around it was still bright and hadn't oxidized at all. I ran my thumb over it and felt the ridge. It hadn't been there the night before. I was sure of it because I washed my car religiously and I noticed everything about its exterior. I stood in my driveway for a long time staring at that scratch. Part of me wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe I'd grazed a branch in the parking lot at work. Maybe a kid on the street ran a stick along it. But I knew better. Someone had touched my car while it was parked in my driveway overnight. I called the non-emergency police line and explained everything. The officer I spoke to was polite but clearly uninterested. He said there wasn't much they could do about someone driving behind me on public roads, and a scratch on a door handle wasn't exactly a criminal emergency. He told me to call back if anything escalated. I thanked him, even though I wanted to scream. For the next few days, I left work earlier, trying to avoid the dark, but the following Wednesday, I had no choice but to stay late again. I left around 9:45 and immediately started scanning my mirrors. For the first 10 minutes, the road behind me was empty. I started to relax, and then the headlights appeared. Same distance, same pacing, same dark SUV. This time, I didn't go home. I drove straight to the police station downtown, which was about 15 minutes in the opposite direction. The entire way there, the SUV stayed behind me. I kept checking, expecting them to peel off once they realized where I was headed, but they didn't. They followed me all the way to the parking lot of the police station. I pulled in and parked right under a light near the entrance. The SUV slowed down as it passed the station, and for the first time, I got a decent look at it. Dark gray or black, tinted windows, no front license plate, which I thought was strange because my state requires one. It crept past the station at maybe 10 miles an hour, almost like the driver was looking at me through the windows, and then it accelerated and disappeared down the road. I went inside and filed a formal report. The officer who took it was more helpful than the one on the phone. He wrote everything down and said they'd make note of the vehicle description. He also asked me a question that caught me off guard. He asked if I'd recently broken up with anyone or had any disputes with neighbors or co-workers. I told him no to all of it. I couldn't think of a single person who'd have a reason to follow me. When I got home that night, I did a thorough walk around my property. Everything seemed normal. The motion light above the garage kicked on as I walked under it, and the backyard was quiet. I went inside, double-checked every lock, and sat on my couch in the dark, watching the street through my front window. Nothing happened that night or the next. By the weekend, I was starting to convince myself that maybe it was over. Maybe whoever it was got spooked by the police station visit. Maybe they realized I wasn't going to be an easy target. I actually started feeling a little silly about the whole thing. On Saturday morning, I decided to mow the lawn and spend some time outside to shake off the paranoia. It was a clear day, cold but sunny, and I felt better than I had all week. After finishing the yard, I went around back to put the mower in the garage. That's when I saw the footprints. There were footprints in the soft dirt along the side of my house, right below my bedroom window. They were shoe prints, large, definitely adult male. and they were deep enough that whoever left them had been standing there for a while. Not walking past, standing. The prints were angled toward the window like someone had been looking in. I felt my whole body go cold. My bedroom window faces the side of the house, and at night the blinds don't fully close because one of the slats is bent. I never bothered to fix it because the side of the house faces nothing but a fence and some bushes. No one would ever be standing there, except someone had been. I went back inside and sat at my kitchen table trying to think. The footprints were clearly fresh. It hadn't rained in days, and the dirt around them was still loose. They could have been from the night before, or even earlier that morning. I hadn't checked the side of the house in days. Then I thought about the scratch on my car door, then the headlights. All of it started collapsing into one picture, and the picture was terrifying. This person didn't just know my route home from work. They knew where I lived. They'd been on my property. They'd been standing outside my bedroom window in the middle of the night, looking in through the gap in my blinds. I called the police again. This time, an officer actually came out and looked at the footprints. He took a few photos and asked me the same questions about whether I had any enemies or disgruntled exes. I gave him the same answers. He said he'd file an updated report and recommended I invest in some security cameras, which I ordered that same afternoon. The cameras arrived on Monday, and I set them up that evening, one covering the front porch and driveway, one covering the back door, and one aimed at the side of the house where I'd found the footprints. I tested them all and made sure the night vision was working. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had some control over the situation. For the first few days, I checked the camera app every morning like clockwork, scrolling through whatever motion alerts had been flagged overnight. Nothing. Not a single notification worth looking at. I never bothered scrubbing through the full footage manually. I figured if something happened, the motion detection would catch it and flag it for me. By Thursday, I was almost disappointed in how boring the alerts were. I was starting to feel like I'd overreacted to the whole thing. Then Friday morning, I checked the side camera and my blood went cold. It had captured something at 3:17 a.m. A figure walked into frame from the direction of my backyard. They moved slowly, deliberately, staying close to the wall of the house. They were wearing a dark hoodie with the hood pulled up and what looked like gloves. They walked directly to my bedroom window and stopped. Then they just stood there for 11 minutes. 11 minutes of someone standing motionless outside my window at 3 in the morning. At one point they leaned forward slightly and I could tell they were looking through the gap in my blinds. My skin was crawling as I watched this. I was looking at footage of someone watching me sleep, and I had been completely unaware. After 11 minutes, the figure stepped back from the window, reached into their pocket, and pulled out what looked like a small piece of paper. They crouched down and placed it on the ground, right against the base of the house, wedged under the siding where I wouldn't see it unless I was specifically looking. Then they walked back the way they came and disappeared off camera toward the backyard. I ran outside in my t-shirt and boxers and went straight to the spot. I got on my knees and reached under the siding. My fingers found it immediately. A folded piece of paper, slightly damp from the morning dew. I pulled it out and unfolded it. Written in small, careful handwriting were 6 words that I will never forget for as long as I live. You look peaceful when you sleep. I dropped the paper like it had burned me. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely pick it up again. I brought it inside and put it in a plastic bag, then called the police for the 3rd time. When the officer came out and watched the footage, his demeanor completely changed. This wasn't a scratch on a car door anymore. He told me they'd increase patrols in my neighborhood and that I should consider staying somewhere else for a few days. He took the note as evidence. I stayed at my friend's apartment for almost a week. I barely slept the first 2 nights even there. I kept seeing that handwriting every time I closed my eyes. But eventually, the distance from the house started to calm me down a little. By the 4th night, I was sleeping almost normally. When I finally came back home, the first thing I did was check every camera. Nothing had been recorded while I was gone. The footprint area was undisturbed. Part of me felt relieved, but a bigger part of me felt like the silence was deliberate, like whoever it was knew I wasn't there and didn't bother coming, which meant they were still watching. That thought kept gnawing at me. I couldn't let it go. So that night, I did something I probably should have done the moment I installed the cameras. I went back through every single hour of footage from every single night since they'd been set up. Not just the night of the window visit, all of it. The front camera had nothing. The side camera only showed the one incident I'd already seen. But when I got to the back door camera footage from the third night after installation, 2 full days before the 11-minute window visit, I found something that changed everything. At 2:41 a.m., the back door opened, not from the outside, from the inside. A figure stepped out onto the back porch, stood there for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, then walked down the steps and into the backyard. They moved calmly, almost casually, like someone stepping outside to check the weather. Then they disappeared into the darkness toward the strip of woods behind my property. A few seconds later, the back door slowly closed on its own the way it does when you don't pull it shut all the way and the hinges just ease it back. I watched it 3 times. Then I watched it again. Each time, the same thing. The door opens from the inside. A person walks out. The door closes behind them. I was home that night. I was asleep in my bed 30 feet from that back door, and someone had walked out of my house at 2:41 in the morning. Not into my house, out of it. That meant at some point before 2:41 a.m., they had gotten inside, and the cameras didn't show them entering from any direction I had covered. Not the front, not the back, not the side of the house. They had found a way in that I didn't even know existed, spent God knows how long inside my house while I slept, and then left through the back door like it was the most natural thing in the world. I sat there staring at my laptop screen for a very long time. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were completely still, which was somehow worse. It was like my body had moved past fear into something else entirely. I started thinking about all the nights before I had the cameras, all the nights I slept in that house with nothing but a motion light and a locked door between me and whoever this was. How many times had they been inside? How many nights had I been asleep while someone stood in my hallway, my kitchen, maybe even my bedroom? The note didn't come from outside the window. It was written by someone who had already been inside. You look peaceful when you sleep. They weren't describing what they saw through a gap in the blinds. They were describing what they saw standing over my bed. I moved out 3 weeks later. I didn't even finish the lease. I packed what I could fit into my car and left the rest. I'm staying with my brother now in a different town, and I've changed my commute, my routine, everything. I haven't told most people the full story because every time I try to explain the footage, the door opening from the inside, the person walking out, people get this look on their face like they want to help but don't know how. The police still don't have any leads. They checked the house after I showed them the footage and found no signs of forced entry anywhere. No broken locks, no tampered windows, no hidden access points. The officer actually asked me if I was sure I hadn't sleepwalked that night, which I almost laughed at. The person on the footage is wearing a hoodie and gloves. I sleep in a t-shirt and boxers. The thing I still can't stop thinking about, the thing that keeps me up more than anything else, is a small detail I noticed on maybe my 5th or 6th time watching the footage. When the figure steps out of the back door and stands on the porch for those few seconds before walking away, they pause and turn their head slightly. Not toward the yard, not toward the woods, toward the camera. They look directly into it for just a second, and then they leave. They knew the camera was there. They knew I'd eventually see the footage. And they walked out the back door anyway. I still don't know what that means, but I know it means they're not afraid of me finding out, and that's the part that won't let me sleep.